So, Colonel, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every couple of months, Scully.
Reviewing and playing some video games.
It's Fancy and the Skull. Yes, Fancy and the Skull. Critiquing some good games and some that are dull. Spreading praise and scorn across 14 platforms. It's Fancy and the Skull. Skull, 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 skull.
But that's not how you double dragon!
TurboGrafx16 was a console I initially missed out on. The only time that we'd ever had a chance to play one growing up was that our cousin had one at her grandmother's house, and most of the time on it was spent playing China Warrior and Bonk's Adventure. Our household had already had like an NES, an Atari 2600, a Sega Genesis, and we had gotten SNES by 1991, so there wouldn't have been any shot of us getting a TurboGrafx16, especially a console with a library that nobody knew anything about.
Initially released in 1987, the PC Engine was developed by the aforementioned Hudson Soft and NEC. Marketed to appeal to metropolitan areas, the PC Engine saw quite a bit of success in Japan, likely due to the densely populated cities. That same success did not quite translate when renamed to TurboGrafx16, and it made its way to the United States with the same strategy. With very few notable titles, the TurboGrafx16 failed to appeal to the American audience. It had no shot of competing with Nintendo and Sega's devices, which were still running hot at the time. The history of the PC Engine is quite a fascinating one. I highly recommend Top Hat Gaming Man's videos about it. I'll leave several links below in the description. They're worth a watch.
Oh, the PC Engine! Just when I was beginning to question your terrible tastes.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. You familiar with this console at all?
I suppose you could say I've dabbled in it.
Hit me up with the info. Where should I start? Rondo of Blood, Soldier Blade, Alien Crush?
JJ and Jeff! What?
You said that way too fast.
You asked for games and I gave you one, you skulking meat lump.
Okay, alright. You raise a good point. I'll trust you.
What is this about?
Yeah, like, navigating feels like it's borderline impossible. Your sprite's so big you take up more than half of the screen, and you're stuck in the middle of it so you can't really see anything that's coming towards you.
You're doing fine. Just pace yourself.
Pace myself? I go from 0 to 40 in a fraction of a second. Even ice stages in Mario games have a little more friction than this.
Oh, that's too bad. Get good, as the kids say.
Whose idea was it to put JJ and Jeff on this mini console?
I have strings that I pull.
As previously stated, I don't own the real deal, which means I can't do a side-by-side comparison of dimensions between the Mini and the original TurboGrafx16. From what I've looked into, it's the largest of the Mini consoles released, and I've also been told that the Mini is not all too much smaller than the original console, maybe 1/3 its original size. And it's also worth pointing out that despite my lack of collecting all things retro, and I do love these plug-and-play devices, the TurboGrafx16 Mini is the only one of them that I really decided to seek out. I didn't go out of my way to grab the NES, SNES, Genesis, or PSX classics, because if I don't have those games already, I probably would have down the line over. The PC Engine has always been untapped potential for me, so finally having a chance to experience a library that up until now was virtually an enigma was an opportunity I didn't want to pass on. Combining the libraries of both the TurboGrafx16 and the Japanese PC Engine, the Mini gives you access to over 50 games including Snatcher, Dama Kaimura, and Spriggan Mark II. Unfortunately, English subtitles aren't provided, so indulging in more of the dialogue-heavy story games is a bit of a pain and defeats the purpose of including them. As far as variety, there's a healthy number of platformers, brawlers, action-adventure titles, a lot of shmup, and even some RTS-style games. It is pretty surreal playing the TurboGrafx16 port of Splatterhouse. The game looks like a succubus had drained it of its life.
Oh, look what they've done to my boy.
You had a hand in this one?
Even regarding this, my hands are tied.
The core gameplay is essentially the same, you walk to the right and hit things, but it feels really muddy and unresponsive. And what's going on with that music? Almost similar feelings on Ninja Gaiden. It plays inferior to the NES version. Maybe I'm just biased to the former. This port seems less responsive and imprecise. And that musical arrangement sounds like an audio seizure. This is the noise your Game Gear makes when you drop it in a kiddie pool. And those are just some of the few notable gaps that stood out to me. Quality titles like Salamander, Neutopia, and Bonk's Revenge are still very fun. The save states makes revisiting what you're playing snap. And hey, New Adventure Island made it on here too. That makes me very happy. This is probably my favorite version of Adventure Island. The console has a little bit of bulk to it. It's pretty light in weight. There's a little bit of volume in there, but it doesn't feel overly substantial. I really wish I had the other models to compare it to. Signature markings like ports for the RF and the antenna switches, those are pretty nice visual touches. The pad is connected via USB, and on top of having a very lengthy cord, it's pretty fine quality. Since the NES pad is the controller that I have the most familiarity with, I like to hold that as the standard. In the hands, it feels closer in bulk to the Master System controller, I think. This also came with accessories for the PC Engine like the multi-tap, which is manufactured by Hori, as well as the controllers, so group games like Bomberman 93 are a cinch to enjoy, and pushes the device beyond just novelty value. Lifting the back of the console is where the HDMI port and the USB Mini that connects the AC adapter, which is unfortunately sold separately. I have a mild problem with that. It's a minor detail of not having a power source in the inbox. However, if you have a common USB charging box for like your cell phone or something, those work well, providing that they supply enough juice to it. The official adapter might be a more viable option. I may have to look into it, but I have an anxiety about a third-party box overheating or possibly overcharging the console. I could be wrong about that. The display is broadcast at 720p, probably upscaled from 480, and the emulation is pretty good all things considered, with a couple of technical hiccups. There is a little bit of input lag, and I noticed it almost immediately during Gradius. I never have, I'm not going to call myself a shmup master or anything, but I don't think I've ever had so many unintentional deaths in a shmup, and trying to play R-Type was pretty annoying. I felt like that I couldn't really maneuver around as freely as I wanted to. Other display functions, there's an option to toggle scan lines, which gives that old CRT look. I'll never understand why that's something you'd want to do on purpose, or why any time goes into making it seem less convincing. I'm not that married to retro. If my devices can connect via HDMI cables, I'd like my display to look as good as possible. Stop with the fake scan lines. It's kinda stupid. I do like toggling between the PC Engine and TurboGrafx menus. It's a really cute aesthetic, especially with the little animation of the cartridge being inserted. Kind of a nice touch. Just had to throw that in there. So, all in all, at its $100 price tag, it runs a little higher than the other classic plug-and-play consoles. With 57 total games blended across the domestic and international libraries, there's certainly some selection to choose from, even if a lot of the games are rather unknown. Unless someone's familiar with it, it would be a little tough to sell the TurboGrafx 16 Mini compared to the other household names. But for gamers who may have heard about it in passing but never quite had a chance to own it growing up, this will provide a pretty decent essential collaboration if you wish to forego collecting the real thing, bearing it's too expensive. Konami and M2, who's had a good working relationship with them, having previously done emulation on the Sega Ages collections and the Rebirth, Contra, Gradius, and Castlevania games, did a pretty credible job with its manufacturing. I like the build of it, even if removing the back of it is a little awkward. It does get a knock for not including a power source, which is stupid, but it can be easily remedied if you happen to have any extra phone charger boxes lying about.
So maybe it's a little bit of my personal bias talking, but I feel like that this is the best of the miniature plug-and-play consoles that have come out thus far. I feel like that it's a great anthology of a library that was mostly untouched by the North American market. At $100 as stated, it is a little steep, but I think that you get some bang for your buck with this, and I'm pretty sure that people are probably waiting on the jailbreaking before this thing's full potential can be maxed. Konami gets quite a bit of flack, but I think that they provided a really fun retro novelty here that I think I'll probably get more play out of than some of the other plug-and-plays that I have. I think it's a solid, B- at best. Its hiccups are pretty apparent once you've played it for a while, but I think it's pretty neat overall. Kind of weird for me to put over a plug-and-play that's not a Neo Geo Pro.
衝前去，全部得失只有全心知，跨步上。